There is a kind of woman who walks alone, not because she has been abandoned, not because she has no other choice, but because she has chosen to carve a path of her own. And that choice, oh, it is not an easy one. It demands sacrifice, courage, and the ability to withstand the weight of the world pressing down on her shoulders. Independence is often spoken of as though it is a gift, as if it is something freely given to those who desire it. But true independence is not a gift. It is a burden that must be willingly carried. It is not simply the absence of reliance on others. It is the full acceptance of responsibility for one's own existence. To claim independence is to claim ownership of every decision, every success, and every failure. The world does not offer comfort to the truly independent. When a person chooses to walk alone, they step away from the safety of collective security. They lose the assurances of a system that protects those who conform. They become responsible for navigating the unpredictable terrain of life without the safety net that others rely on. This is not a position of ease, it is a position of great risk. With independence comes the necessity of discipline. There is no external force ensuring that one wakes up early, stays committed, or pushes forward in times of hardship. Without the structure provided by others, an independent person must construct their own foundation, and this is far more difficult than it seems. It requires a strength that does not waver under pressure, a focus that does not scatter in the face of temptation. The weight of independence is made heavier by the fact that there is no one to blame when things go wrong. It is easy to resent authority figures, to blame circumstances, to look outward for the source of one's suffering. But when a person is truly independent, that luxury is stripped away. Every mistake, every misstep, every failure becomes a reflection of the self. This is a terrifying realization for those who are not prepared to bear it. The burden of independence is not only practical, but psychological. The human mind seeks connection, validation, and reassurance. To walk alone is to endure the loneliness of self-sufficiency. It means making decisions without approval, standing firm without validation, and pressing forward without applause. It means understanding that the pursuit of one's own path will often be met with resistance, and that resistance must be faced alone. Independence forces confrontation with one's own limitations. The illusion of boundless potential is comforting, but reality is not so kind. The independent individual must come to terms with the edges of their ability, the flaws in their character, the weaknesses they cannot ignore. There is no one else to compensate for what they lack, no external force to make up for their deficiencies. They must either improve or be crushed under the weight of their own shortcomings. The truly independent person must also accept the consequences of their own strength. Many admire independence from a distance, but when faced with it directly, they recoil. To walk alone is to intimidate those who have never done so. It is to be misunderstood, to be labeled as cold, arrogant, or unyielding. The world does not always celebrate independence, it often resents it, because the presence of someone who walks alone is a reminder of what others have not dared to do. Independence is not a static achievement, it is a constant state of struggle. One does not simply become independent and remain so without effort. It is a process of continuous self-examination, continuous refinement, continuous confrontation with the demands of reality. There is no end to it, no final point at which the work is complete. Those who seek independence must understand that it is not a destination, but an unending responsibility. There is no guarantee that the burden of independence will bring happiness. Many who seek it do so with the belief that it will offer freedom from suffering, but this is not the case. Independence does not eliminate struggle, it amplifies it. It does not remove obstacles, it ensures that they must be faced alone. It does not grant relief, it demands endurance. And yet, despite all of this, there are those who still choose to walk the path of independence. Not because it is easy, not because it is comfortable, but because it is the only way to truly become something more. The weight of independence shapes those who carry it. It forces them to grow beyond their limitations, to become sharper, stronger, more resilient. It is a burden, but it is also a form of transformation. To carry the weight of independence is to accept isolation. It is to understand that few will walk beside you, and fewer still will understand why you have chosen this path. It is to accept that comfort and security will always be available to those who are willing to conform, but that those who choose independence must reject such comforts in favor of something greater. This is why independence is not for everyone. It is not something that can be granted or imposed. It must be chosen, and once chosen, it must be endured. Because the moment one takes full responsibility for their existence, there is no turning back. There is a crucial distinction between walking alone and being alone. Many assume that choosing independence is synonymous with isolation, that to forge one's own path is to sever all connections. But this is a misunderstanding of what it truly means to walk alone. Independence is not about rejecting others. It is about refusing to be defined by them. It is about carrying the weight of one's own existence without demanding that others bear it for you. The fear of solitude often prevents people from embracing independence. They believe that to step away from the expectations of the group is to abandon companionship, that individuality comes at the cost of belonging. But true independence does not mean living without connection. It means choosing connection freely, rather than relying on it for validation or survival. A person who walks alone does not walk in an empty world. Relationships still exist, but they are formed differently. Instead of relationships built on necessity, they become relationships built on mutual respect. Instead of friendships maintained by obligation, they become friendships rooted in shared values. Those who walk alone do not seek approval, and because of that, the connections they do form are stronger, untainted by dependency or fear. The independent individual understands that meaningful relationships are not based on constant proximity. A person does not need to be surrounded by others at all times to feel a sense of belonging. Walking alone means knowing that solitude is not the absence of connection, but the presence of self-sufficiency. It means recognizing that the depth of a relationship is not measured by how often someone is present, but by the strength of the bond that exists even in absence. It is easy to mistake solitude for loneliness, but the two are not the same. Loneliness is a state of emotional distress, a longing for connection that is unmet. Solitude, on the other hand, is a chosen space, a place where one can exist without distraction, without compromise. Those who walk alone learn to embrace solitude not as a punishment, but as a sanctuary, a place where clarity is found, where strength is cultivated. Walking alone also means choosing quality over quantity. When a person is no longer bound by the need for constant social validation, they become more selective about the people they allow into their lives. They are no longer willing to tolerate shallow connections, meaningless conversations, or relationships that drain them rather than enrich them. They understand that one genuine relationship is worth more than 100 superficial ones. The strength of walking alone is that it allows one to engage with others from a position of wholeness rather than need. Many enter relationships, friendships, partnerships, even professional connections, seeking completion, looking for something outside themselves to fill an internal void. But those who walk alone do not seek completion in others because they have already built themselves. This makes their relationships more balanced, more authentic, more resilient. Independence does not mean shutting out the world. It does not mean refusing help or denying the value of companionship, but it does mean that one must first learn to stand alone before they can truly stand beside another. Without this foundation, relationships become a means of escape rather than a source of strength. Those who walk alone do not fear connection, but they do not depend on it to define them. There is also a paradox within this idea. Those who are most capable of walking alone are often those who attract the most meaningful connections. People are drawn to those who do not seek validation, who do not beg for approval, who do not compromise their integrity for the sake of fitting in. When a person carries themselves with self-assurance, with the quiet strength of someone who does not need constant affirmation, others take notice. Walking alone teaches resilience, and resilience is magnetic. It signals to the world that a person is capable, reliable, unshaken by external forces. This creates a different kind of connection, not one born out of desperation or convenience, but one built on mutual recognition. The strongest relationships are not those of dependence, but of shared strength. It is important to recognize that walking alone does not mean rejecting the wisdom of others. The independent individual does not isolate themselves from knowledge, from mentorship, from the guidance of those who have walked the path before them. But they do not follow blindly. They listen, they learn, they adapt, but they remain the ones who ultimately choose their own direction. To walk alone is not to be alone. It is to exist without chains. It is to walk through the world with open eyes, forming connections not out of need but out of choice, embracing solitude without fearing isolation, and understanding that true belonging is not found in others, it is found first within oneself.